Welcome back, Canyon lovers. I am Brian Special, and this is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters for one-of-a-kind canyon-themed tees and hoodies, and pretty soon, our Rim2Rim pack, which was designed specifically for canyon hikes. Please check out brightangeloutfitters.com. We do it for the love of the canyon. All right, it's the middle of winter, but there's already a buzz about the coming hiking season in the canyon. And the Facebook groups are starting to see plans being finalized and all the usual questions being asked, especially as it relates to Rim2Rim, which is without a doubt the number one bucket list hike in the Grand Canyon. If you're looking for a reason to do it, don't look too hard. As long as you prepare properly and ask all the questions you have, Rim2Rim can be the experience of a lifetime. If you're not aware, there is a network of Facebook groups like Grand Canyon Hikers and Grand Canyon Rim2Rim that is the absolute best place to ask questions and get answers from canyon veterans who love to help. So we encourage everyone to join. To find those, we've got them listed in the show notes of every episode that we do. Well, our guest today got started on his canyon journey in the days before Facebook. And maybe if he'd had those groups to ask questions of, he never would have made one of the decisions that he did. James Tenelshof grew up in Toledo, Ohio. Says he didn't see a mountain until he was 18, and now lives in Tucson, Arizona, about a 5-hour drive from the South Rim, with his wife and dogs, one of whom, Pepper, you will hear in the background protecting the house from time to time during the show. James is a lifelong athlete, with cycling and trail running being his sports of choice. But now, at 57, he's rediscovered a love for the Grand Canyon, a love that started, whether he realized it at the time or not, as a teenager.
So the first time I went to the Grand Canyon, I was snot-nosed high school kid and on a road trip with a couple of buddies, and it was almost, the classic, we pull up, get to the rim, we're like, yeah, there's the Grand Canyon, let's take 2 pictures, we gotta go.
As it is with most of us, it wasn't until years later that James began appreciating what he'd seen and had the opportunity to venture below the rim, spurred on by some family competitiveness.
Some family members that I had back in the 90s, they were starting to do this thing called Rim2Rim, and I had never heard of it before. It was kind of like this group of type A lawyers from downtown Phoenix, where they're all either ex-marathon runners, ex-Ironman triathlete type of guys, that their next big goal in life is do a Rim2Rim. So did a Rim2Rim and didn't know what I was in for. There was no internet, no Facebook groups for it. So went into it pretty much completely blind. And pretty fun experience, because okay, you do the Grand Canyon, it's like, okay, the Grand Canyon is not just this thing that you look at from the rim, you actually go down and experience it. Did that a few times.
But after those few Rim2Rims, life got in the way. Work took James and his family to Idaho. But no sooner had they moved back to Arizona some 15 years later, and with James about to celebrate his 50th birthday, that a new chapter in his canyon adventures began, thanks to a friend also about to mark a milestone birthday, his 55th.
My hiking partner from Idaho called me up and said, hey, you're living in Phoenix now, we should do the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And he goes, yeah, we're both having monumental birthdays this year. Let's go for it. And we started plotting. Oh, what do you want to do? Do we just want to do like Rim to River? A beer or two into the phone call, and in an act of bravado, I'm like, you know what? Let's just go for the whole thing. Let's just do Rim to Rim to Rim. We can do it.
And you had never done it before. Rim2Rim is as far as you've gone at this point.
Yes, yeah. And I figured, how hard can it be coming back?
Oh, man.
He looks at his calendar and he goes, hey, I've got a free weekend in 4 weeks. I'll meet you, I'll fly down. And so he flies down to Phoenix. I pick him up from the airport, bring him over to the house. My wife makes us dinner, have dinner, and then from Phoenix we drive straight to the Grand Canyon, straight to the South Rim. Fueled on a couple of cups of coffee we picked up at the all-night Starbucks in Flagstaff. We hit the Grand Canyon South Rim about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wait, so your friend flew into Phoenix, had dinner at your house, And
yes.
then you guys decided to not get a good night's sleep. You decided to take the essentially 4-hour drive to the Grand Canyon to start a rim to rim to rim in the middle of the night.
Yeah, because mentally we still thought we were in our 30s, despite us being in our 50s, and yeah, which was a taste of things to come, because like the whole trip ended up just going completely south from beginning to end after that experience. So we get going.
And you're going South Kaibab, North Kaibab, Bright Angel? Is that the route?
Correct. And this will make sense at the end of the story, but I don't need an asthma inhaler often, but I bring it as a kind of a backup in case I do need it. And so I made sure that I packed my asthma inhaler, but in the last minute reshuffling of my pack at the trailhead, I ended up leaving it in the front seat of my car.
All right, so let's reset what James can look back on today as a completely crazy plan. His friend from Idaho flew into Phoenix that afternoon. They had dinner at James's place, and then, rather than rest up for a hike the next day, they drove the 4 hours to the South Rim, took a taxi to the South Kaibab trailhead, and dropped into the canyon at 1 a.m. for one of the toughest hikes in the world, a one-day rim to rim to rim, which would cover some 44 miles and 20,000 feet of elevation change from South Kaibab to North Kaibab and then back out on Bright Angel. And now James has even forgotten his inhaler. And he also says he packed far too much food. What could possibly go wrong?
So my pack was a little heavier than normal, no sleep, hitting the trail at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I've only seen this at the Grand Canyon once, but it was quite the experience. We dive off the South Rim, and the wind on the South Rim is just howling. And it's this weird kind of wind where it's just kind of circling back and forth, bouncing off the rim and kind of going back down to the canyon. And it's picking up all the silt and dust and dirt from the South Kaibab Trail and just creating this wall of dust. And it was so thick that we couldn't see more than 5-10 feet in front of us until we got down to probably tip-off. So from South Kaibab trailhead down to tip-off, it was just a giant wall of silty dust. Didn't think too much of it at the time, but looking back, it's like, oh, I should have had one of those buffs or maybe a bandana or something, and should have been breathing through that thing. And because breathing through silt and dust is probably not the best thing for you. But we got through that. I actually really don't remember anything getting to the North Rim, because we just kind of cruised that section and everything went fine. Made it to the North Rim, I think probably 10 o'clock or so, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. So we got across in 9.5. So we figured, okay, we got across 9.5. We'll double that and add an extra hour for Bright Angel. So we should be back in 10.5, 11 hours max.
What was that feeling like? You had done rim to rim before, but what was the feeling like at the top of North Kaibab, realizing that you had to turn around and do basically the whole thing all over again? What was that feeling like?
The first time, it's very daunting. A rim to rim is probably one of the toughest hikes you're going to do in most people's lives, but then you're going to turn around and do the same hike again without stopping. You sit on the North Rim, you're like, oh, wow, I've done it, but now I got to turn around and do it again.
But you guys were feeling okay for this one at this point.
Yeah, we're feeling okay. That was one of the places that I learned is like, I don't like to linger on the North Rim trailhead very long now. What I've discovered is if you linger at the North Rim trailhead, really the only place to sit is these very cold block walls, or you sit on the ground. Neither which, for me, does great things for my legs or how I'm feeling. And so I think we lingered on the North Rim probably just a hair too long. So coming off, I was a little rusty, but going, once we warmed up, made it back down pretty well. But then Cottonwood, it started heating up, and then by the time we got to the box, it was hot. It was definitely in the 90s, but with the 90s, but with the heat bouncing off, felt like 100, no shade. And going through that box, it just feels like it doesn't end. And I'd go around a corner, and I'd curse myself again. It's like, there's no way that this thing keeps going more.
I even think even on the best days, even on your best hiking days, the box never ends, James. It never ends. It's always around the next bend.
Yeah, it just we trudged through the box, but once we got through the box, at that point that's kind of where the wheels fell off the bus. It's like my soul was crushed in the box. We get to Phantom Ranch, and I'm just sitting there going, now I have to actually make it up to the top of the South Rim again.
Well, what are you feeling physically at this point and mentally?
Mentally, I'm kind of shot. But I think with my athletic background, I'm kind of used to just kind of gritting my teeth and going for it. And I'm like, well, there's no other alternative. I just have to do it. Just start putting one foot in front of the other. Start hiking out, and at which point my stomach starts rebelling on me. And no matter what I start to eat, it won't go down. Chew on a candy bar, take a couple of chews, and just spit the thing out because I can't eat. Try drinking water. That's not working. And made it up Bright Angel. Made it through the sandbox portion of it. Not that bad. Made it up just south, just below Havasupai Gardens. And that's when the trouble began. Is I had one of my very, very, very rare asthma attacks. And the only way I could explain it is try breathing through a coffee straw. So I'd hike for 100 yards, stop, try to catch my breath, hike for 100 yards, catch my breath. So I pretty much did that all the way from Havasupai Gardens all the way up to the South Rim. I just did it 100 yards at a time.
No fun.
No fun, but still funner than the guys who were puking their guts out next to me that we passed going up. But even in the pits of despair, I mean, there's something about going up Bright Angel in the dark. Just the amount of critters that go across the Bright Angel Trail in the dark. Like, I've lived in Arizona for years. I've never seen scorpions as large as the ones that I've seen on this Bright Angel Trail at night. Like, they look like little lobsters. So I saw scorpions all over the place, a couple of tarantulas. And anyways, dragged myself up, and we ended up getting there. So now I think it took us about 22 hours total to get back and across. And at that point, found my asthma inhaler sitting in the front seat of my car, because every time I'd stop to look, get food or water or whatever, I was frantically looking through my pack, going, I know I packed it, couldn't find it.
Ugh.
Then to make matters worse, my friend had booked us hotel rooms at the Grand Canyon Lodge. And without thinking, it's the Grand Canyon Lodge in Williams. Yeah, so neither one of us slept. I'm half comatose. I'm driving.
So what did that experience teach you about the canyon and challenging the canyon, I guess?
So what that experience taught me about the Grand Canyon is go in prepared. I realized for myself personally that I can do a rim to rim with about 4 to 5 weeks of training. I figured, okay, so as long as I'm between 10K and half marathon shape, I can be ready for a Grand Canyon rim to rim in 4 to 5 weeks. I discovered that a rim to rim to rim is exponentially a longer process. So it's probably 4 months worth of training to get a really good base.
The total distance James and his friend had covered on their rim to rim to rim, right at 44 miles, with more than 20,000 feet of elevation change. And it was an experience that stuck with him for weeks after, physically and mentally.
It took me like a good month to really recover from it. And even my wife was like, you're never doing that again. I can't have you walking around like a zombie for an entire month. Like, it really did some damage. And
like, how so? How did it affect you in the days and weeks after?
I think just chronic fatigue. Like, I just couldn't bounce back. Just didn't have any energy. Was very lethargic. I'm pretty meticulous about tracking my resting heart rate every morning, and I kind of know what my baseline resting heart rate is. And my resting heart rate stayed elevated for probably at least 2 or 3 weeks. Usually after a big effort, it goes back to normal in 2 or 3 days. but it was 2 or 3 weeks of being elevated. Yeah, I was just kind of walking around the house like a zombie, which my wife didn't really care for too much. I've talked about this with a lot of my friends, where you do the Grand Canyon and you would spend so much time focusing on it that nobody ever talks about kind of like the post-canyon depression, where you've done this big thing and you've been obsessed with it, and then you get back in the real world and you realize, so you just did this like huge monumental thing and you realize, no, nobody really cares. So it's like a combination. It's like, okay, you get depressed because mentally you're just out of it. You've been thinking about this thing for so long. And then physically I was just wiped out.
But even after all that, James's love for the canyon only grew. It wasn't long before he began hikes off of the main corridor trails into the canyon's backcountry, inspired by the exploits of Harvey Butchert, a canyon legend who spent more than 1,000 days and hiked over 12,000 miles in remote sections of the park between 1945 and 1988. Butchert's book, Grand Obsession, is one of James's prized possessions.
He was a mild-mannered math teacher at NAU after World War II, and he had never seen the Grand Canyon before and literally became obsessed with it, and he hiked more miles in the Grand Canyon, mapped out more miles of the Grand Canyon than anybody else in history. And just a fascinating guy to read. He's one of these people that he had the perfect body shape for doing Grand Canyon hiking. He was on the short side, slight, so he was probably 130, 135. And just to show you how far technology has gone, he did most of it carrying a Boy Scout water canteen and hiking in Chuck Taylors.
Well, today technology has obviously advanced, but conquering the canyon still requires human grit, determination, and a commitment to be prepared for all the ups and especially the downs.
Until you've done it, people do not understand just how physically tough going downhill for 7 miles in the Grand Canyon is. It's like I can hike uphill all day long, not feel a thing. But it's that downhill that's going to kill you. Being physically prepared for the downhill portion of the Grand Canyon is completely important. The first time I did the Rim2Rim back in the 90s, this is pre-internet, dark ages. There's nobody, there were no books on it. Just kind of did it. But simple little things like, nobody ever told me that you should probably trim your toenails before you do a Grand Canyon Rim2Rim. And the first Rim2Rim I did, I think I lost 4 toenails just from going, 7 miles of pounding down. This is one thing that I've really started doing the last few years is just the importance of rucking, where anytime I walk my dogs, I throw in a 30-pound backpack. So in addition to all my normal training for Grand Canyon trips, I'm also getting in probably another 15 to 16 miles a week of low-impact work just from walking my dogs 2 to 3 miles a day, 5-6 days a week, with a 30-pound ruck on. And then I've made this mistake. Other people, because they say, well, you don't want to be underprepared in the Grand Canyon, but I think a lot of people just go, oh, I'm doing Rim2Rim2Rim, I'm going to bring 5 pounds of food. So I think the secret is figuring out the right amount of food, so you're not bringing, because that's the thing that always frustrates me whenever I get done with the Grand Canyon, because I still overpack, and it just kills me that I'll get done with the Grand Canyon, and it's like, why did I just waste all that space in my pack? I still have a pound of food sitting in the bottom of my pack. So many little things that I've learned over the years. I think with the Grand Canyon, it's the grand sum of a million little things that you need to master. Even though a lot of people joke about it, but I think, having that book Over the Edge about all the deaths in the Grand Canyon should be everybody's reference manual. I always kind of flip through there before I head to the Grand Canyon. It's always sobering because I actually knew somebody who is in the book. So one of my high school classmates Somebody that was on the cross-country team with me got swept away in a flash flood back in the 90s. So she made the book. Yeah, and that was one of those, like I said, there's something about the Grand Canyon where it's just really spiritual and it's just kind of weird. I wanted to buy the book, so I'm always poking around used bookstores, and so there's a used bookstore right across the street from my house. Went over there, and lo and behold, they had a copy of Over the Edge. So I picked it up, flipping through there. I just want to see what edition it is. I knew my classmate had been in the book, but I wanted to make sure, is it the edition that she made? I pick it up, and there's actually a bookmark on the page that she's on. So that was the weirdest thing, because I went to high school 2,000 miles away, so nobody out here would even have any reason to bookmark that page.
But that's not even the end of the high school connections. It was halfway through his senior year that James's family moved across the country from Toledo to Tucson. James was not happy, to say the least, about leaving his friends and his life behind.
The school that I went to is like, you still need to take one more science class as a senior. I'm like, man, I had the cushy schedule at my old high school where I didn't have to do any science, anything like that. I'm like, what's the easiest science class that I can try to breeze through? And they said, there's one called environmental science. And it's just, you're just going to talk about rocks and trees. And so the guy who taught the class started talking about, the Grand Canyon and Arizona geography, Arizona geology. And I kind of blew it off, but at the same time I was listening to the guy. A couple years later, I started pulling out my old textbooks, maybe I could do this, maybe I can do that. And so I always say, the nugget, the seed that was germinated from my Grand Canyon experiences was this particular teacher planting the seed 40 years ago. About 6 months ago, our family and I started attending a brand new church here in Tucson, and we're going up to take communion, and the guy giving the communion out was that particular teacher.
Whoa.
So I pulled him aside after the service, and I'm like, you have no idea the seed that you planted 40 years ago. And I started telling him about all my Grand Canyon trips. He's like, oh, that's amazing. And, so now every time I bump into him, he's like, yeah, what's the next trip you've got planned? Where are you going this time? Where are you going that time?
What a great story. Holy cow.
I think the Grand Canyon just sets up these weird, coincidences where it just connects you to people and time. And now I look at the Grand Canyon and I just see the whole world unfolding in front of me.
That is James Tenelshof. By the way, he says his favorite route in the canyon is a toss-up. He likes the South Kaibab Tonto Bright Angel hike because he says it's almost perfect in length, views, and challenge without wiping you out. Outside the corridor, James cites a failed attempt of Cheops Pyramid because he loved navigating Utah Flats and Piano Alley, and because it was his first taste of going off-trail at the Grand Canyon. All right, please remember to check out brightangeloutfitters.com for original, one-of-a-kind, wholly authentic canyon gear. When you see a Victor Vomit t-shirt or a hoodie that simply says, The Canyon, you'll know it's from a place that does it for the love of all things Grand Canyon, brightangeloutfitters.com. If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a rating or review on whatever platform you're listening on. That helps us fulfill our mission of helping as many people as we can have their best possible experience at the Grand Canyon. That's it for now. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you as always to go hike the canyon, take that first step, embrace the journey, and when you get there, whether you're worried about time goals or taking your time, just hike your own hike. There is no wrong way to do it. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by Bright Angel Outfitters.